Welcome to the Home and Family Culture Podcast, where I discuss how families can uncover their collective vision, values, beliefs, and traditions that shape their family culture. I'm your host, Jody Chafee. In this podcast, I like to interview parenting experts who have tips for helping families shape their family culture, and successful individuals who can discuss how their success influences and was influenced by their family culture. In this episode, I'll be talking to Emma Briggs. Emma Jacobs Briggs is the voice and character dancer of Fufa from Nick Jr.'s Yo Gabba Gabba. She also sings vocals on the Aquabats album The Floating Eye of Death. She is an actress, voiceover artist, and the mother of 2 girls. Emma got her bachelor's degree of science in home and family living from Brigham Young University. She served a mission for the LDS Church in Hawaii in 2003 and to 2004, which is where I met her. Emma grew up in a family of child actors in Los Angeles in the 1980s, and then in a combined family helping raise their adopted twin siblings with special needs rescued from Romania in the 1990s. So Emma, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited to talk with you. Will you tell us more about your family growing up and how your experiences with your family helped you to develop resilience?
Yes, great. So, I was born in 1981. I was the 5th child of Becky and Kimball Jacobs. And at the time, they were with one of the top agencies in Los Angeles with their older kids. My oldest sister, Rachel, and then there was 3 brothers, and then me. So we were like a boy sandwich, right?
Yeah.
And she actually she was working all the time, and the second oldest, Christian Jacobs, they were working a lot when I was born. They actually got their start in the 70s. She got her start in The Mailbox and Uncle Ben, which were LDS church movies in Utah. And since they were like, hey, this is working, let's move the family to LA. Let's try our hand, because at the time, my dad was having a career shift, and so they're like, well, what do we have to lose? And they had met at BYU's theater department in the 60s, my parents. So they were both inclined to acting and drama, and anyway, and I'll say also type 1 personality, real high energy, enthusiastic. And, ironically, even though I think at the time they were like, what do we got to lose? Because we're broke. Why do I go and try our hand at this? They moved to a place that was perfectly conducive for their family's personalities, these type 1 personalities that people medicate. They're just these high energy. But it was this perfect environment for my family. So I grew up feeling like we were these geniuses instead of like there was something wrong with us because we didn't fit into the 9-to-5 workday.
Interesting.
Which is awesome. And I now as an adult, and I've had to figure out how to function as that. But like how beautiful. And don't get me wrong, I'm not diagnosing my family or anything. They're awesome. I'm saying type 1 personality as a really great thing.
Yeah.
I had an agent in utero, and my first audition was for Little House on the Prairie as the baby Rose, the infant, and which I didn't get. But actually, and I remember a lot growing up not getting auditions. I actually wasn't. I was pretty tall for my age, and I had vision problems. So I had crossed eyes. It's just so awesome. I remember going out for a Honey Cheerios commercial, and I was so excited because I was going to meet the animated bee guy. I thought
you're going to see him.
My 5-6-year-old self, like, oh, that's so cool. I love him. He's my friend. From the commercials. I did not meet him, and I just remember my mom taking off my glasses and going, "Honey, okay, just relax. You don't have to. You can." Because my look was more conducive to not having glasses.
Oh, okay.
Some of my older brothers, like my brother Parker, he had this amazing look. He looked, actually, he would get confused a lot for the kid in the Christmas Story, because that was about that same era. He looked a lot like that with the thick
like Ralphie.
glasses and so just adorable, nerdy. He got a lot of granola bar commercials. And
Okay.
yeah, he had this awesome look. And Parker, he's so talented. He's an artist now. And he was the art director for Yo Gabba Gabba. And
Okay.
he was the baker on Yo Gabba Gabba. And he did all the character animation, and he did a lot of different voices as well. Anyway, but point was that so I grew up like going out for auditions and not really getting stuff, like I did an extra work for this after school special called A Family Again that was directed by Henry Winkler, and Carney Wilson was in it, and Rhea Perlman, Danny DeVito's wife, and it's not Poltergeist. It was the little girl from The Exorcist, I think. She's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, point is that was like my one job as a child.
Right,
so I really didn't do much, but my older siblings did a ton.
But it was a big part of your whole upbringing that everybody was doing acting and like getting into that lifestyle and that environment and that.
Oh yeah, and they were like working with these cool celebrities. I remember going to a taping for Growing Pains because my older sister had a reoccurring role. Growing Pains. In fact, they were going to cast Rachel, Christian, and Parker, the three oldest, as the Growing Pains cast.
Wow.
Yeah, and there was actually they'd gotten called back, but there was a mistake with the address, so they didn't make it.
Oh, sad.
Right? So that there's so many stories that we have like that. They're so cool. In the 80s of just like, oh yeah, it was between Rachel and Jennifer Connelly for Labyrinth. Right? Like really amazing experience.
Interesting.
Like, they all went out for Beverly Hills 90210. Rachel and Christian both did. And because they were just in that world. Rachel was on Family Ties. She was on Different Strokes. She did so many cool things. And she was just the perfect child actor. She took direction so well. And we grew up really religious, and we knew the Phoenixes because they were really religious, but in a different kind of they were in a different religion. But there was a similar kind of like this is our family's mission and a family identity. And so it was interesting. And so it was really hard, like for Christian, when River OD'd and stuff, like they hung out, So there was that life. And then it was very, very different when my parents got divorced. I was only around 4 or 5.
Okay.
And then my mom got remarried when I was about 7, and I got 3 stepsisters. He had another daughter that didn't live with us, his oldest daughter from a different marriage, my stepdad. And he came from a family of 11. He was a big family. My Aunt Deanne's idea to adopt from Romania, she had seen this 2020 on the neglect and the over just how the orphanage since Ceausescu, the communist dictator, wouldn't allow birth control, and they had to have children, but then they didn't have the economy to sustain big families.
Right. And is that where the babies like didn't ever get held, and so they would just die or grow up with like really poor development of social,
family
connection? Scientists,
it's like it's like this. It's really interesting because it's what happens to humans when babies aren't interacted with.
Right. Like they were given enough food and rest, and clothing, but because they weren't held, they just wouldn't flourish.
Wouldn't thrive.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
2-year-olds would look like 4-year-olds because they just weren't interacted with.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you guys adopted these kids, what was their condition like?
They were preemies. They were twins. And we only thought that they had, we knew the boy had a heart murmur this was 1990, 91. And they just, they knew, being preemie, their medicine was like 1940s, 1930s level. So, and that's why too, they didn't know that she was going to be having twins, and she was, she didn't deliver cesarean. They had no idea the second baby was coming.
Wow.
And so once they got him back, and it took them 2 months to get them out of the country, my parents, my mom and my stepdad, because for some reason, since they already had a big family, of 8, 9 kids living at home, for some reason, some lawyer, Romanian lawyer, took it all the way to the Supreme Court of Romania because he had mistakenly thought that like our 5 or 6 bedroom home was like a 5 just room home or something. He realized that there was going to be a bigger space,
enough bedrooms,
whatnot. And anyway, so he thought that was not a good idea for someone that already had so many kids to be adopting twins.
Even though the alternative was what? Like
the alternative, somebody had made a documentary of Romania's forgotten children and what happened to the children that had special needs. Romania was even worse.
Yeah.
That were neglected.
I'm sure.
Awful, condition. And so, man, and it was actually quite, because since my, teenage years, so I was about 10 when they came home, and then all my older siblings and stepsisters, they eventually, they were getting married and going out and going on missions. And so like my teenage years, there was a lot of family work with, so then later on, Allie and Andrew, that was like my family work. It was very unglamorous.
Right.
They got diagnosed with cerebral palsy
and
autism, high function autism. So my sister, she can walk, but my little brother, and they're 25, 26 now. And my little brother still has to walk with a walker, and they're both in special needs homes now.
Okay.
But they didn't get placed there until like teens because of my mom's health. But, it was very unglamorous, changing my little brother's, 8-year-old diapers, and, there's a lot of family work.
Yeah. That's really busy. And so you guys were all doing this on top of the acting and the auditioning, and
they kind of stopped
life.
Because I think my mom, it wasn't really something that my mom was happy about, that her kids felt like this burden of providing for the family. Even though that was kind of what happened, it wasn't necessarily, and that's ultimately really what broke up my parents' marriage. So that's why, even though they would get, different jobs, after, when my mom got remarried, like I know Parker did Wonder Years and
nice
stuff. Yeah. They kind of, my mom wanted the more traditional, the husband provided and she stayed at home and whatnot. Even though she wasn't really, she didn't really plan to have, she thought that I was going to be her last child. So
right.
She didn't plan on having, the twins. And then it was so much more work than she had expected.
Yeah.
That they had special needs.
That could be like a whole separate topic of, parents who expecting, you never know what to expect when you have your family. Like some people will do anything to have babies and never do. And then there's some people that they have babies and they have the special needs, and it's like, whoa, where do I go from here? And I think that's a really important thing to address, is that I think in some ways, not that it compares to having kids with special needs, but I think every family kind of has that sense of, well, I wasn't prepared for this. Right. And yet we have to figure out how can we thrive as a family with the challenges that we have to endure. And so how is it that your family did thrive with, even with these challenges that was presented with the unexpected growth of your family?
I really think it is that mindset of how we view things is actually more important than the actual trial itself.
Yes.
From what I can, from my experience, because, I think in the 80s with the child acting thing, I know that all my brothers and sisters were very more averse to the fame of it, and they were like, we're doing this because this is our family's work.
Yeah,
and we're all cooperating, and this is the expectation that our parents have, that we are all that we're all coming together and we're working, and they're building resilience through all these interviews that they don't get.
Right.
And then the jobs, and then they get the highs with the jobs they do get, but it was a very kind of a grounding thing. And yet it was because their perspective was more on a faith thing. It was more about the faith of it. And with that later on, how hard it got with the twins in the 90s, that eventually that perspective kind of shifted with like, oh, this is so hard, even though, and you know, but even though I feel like the way that my mom and the way that my family thought so out of the box was very beneficial for their autism, even though my family, because we weren't the most like routines, and like, especially for special needs, and you need those, you know, that structure to take care of special needs kids. But I think that we were able to compensate for it with the fun that we had and the enthusiasm of life and of that we brought in, and they did well. But I think there was the trials and that perspective. It was hard to keep up that positive, that positivity.
So did you feel like your mom was able to model that resilience and that grit of, you know, this is hard, but we just keep going and we keep doing the work?
Yes.
How did you develop that vision or that goal or that lifestyle of the resilience and the grit in spite of the trials?
I think it was more of like, this work had to be done, and enduring it, especially. It was interesting because moving back down in 98 to California, I had culture shock from Utah, and that Bountiful High School where there was set rules and everything, and then everything was going on at home, and my mom needed me at home, but then you're also trying to be a high schooler and fit in, and I had a bit of that. I think I got shy for a year, you know, like everybody knew me as the Aquabat sister, became popular then. And that was kind of intimidating too. And then I was kind of intimidated of like California culture, even though I didn't really need, if anything, California was a lot more open and accepting of just different,
differences.
Differences. And so, but I think it was more of like of a enduring of just, this is what happened, you know, we got to get my brother and sister out of the car, and we got to go do our things, and we got to get through the door, even though they're having a hard time with the wheelchairs. And it was, I'm realizing that it helped me stay in the trial of it, because and endure through things. Even though things weren't perfect, and I was feeling depressed, and I was feeling down, and I was questioning things, but we just still had to, still had to help
keep going.
You still have to keep going. Yeah. And I'm realizing that I that translated to my, I took this Meisner 2-year workshop that was, a lot of people ended up dropping out of. It was this intense acting course, barely 2010, 2011-ish. I really had wanted good acting training, and I was so grateful that in Salt Lake somebody was offering this and doing all that work to get this workshop up. But Meisner is very like, you know, taking these awful experiences of your life, or not awful, but like just the best, you know, to get that actor's toolbox of emotions that you can draw to, and then realizing what experiences in your life get you in that state, where whatever scene you're in, and then you draw from that. But whoa, it was so deep and so vulnerable and so painful for me. I really wanted to run like every week. I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? But I'm realizing that translated, that just that endurance of like, let's just get back in the ring.
Yeah.
Because I have to.
Yeah.
This is the calling. This is the family calling. This is my life calling. I just have to get back in the ring.
Yeah.
Even though I'm doing it poorly.
So those experiences really did help you to develop that grit that, life isn't perfect, but we just keep going because it's what needs to be done, or this is the choice that I've made and I need to continue to be accountable to that choice that I made, and just keep doing what. So the thought that I had when we were talking about this topic, that we were going to talk about this, was that, have you seen Wonder Woman yet?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm sorry for our listeners if there's spoilers in here, but I have been thinking a lot about that, and how that life has opposition. Always. Like, even inside of ourselves, we are always battling this fight between good and evil. And like in the world, it's always going on, there's always going to be good and evil. But that, as a part of our doctrine, is, that opposition is necessary for us to have our agency. And so that if we didn't have the opposition, if we didn't have the challenges, if we didn't have the trials, if we didn't have that constant battle whether to choose love and hate, then we wouldn't have a choice. Mm-hmm. There would only, you know what I mean? There wouldn't be an opportunity to choose. And so I just think that when we grow up having trials and things that force us to endure, then we are learning about that opposition, and we're learning about what it takes to have the grit and the struggles. And, the things that we endure as kids, or our children endure, that we don't know what they're going to grow up to do and become. That, you're taking your experiences growing up and being a mom, and the challenges that being a mom presents, and you can use that as a tool to fulfill your mission and your purpose. I mean, we never want to wish anything negative or awful on our kids, but it's like, the example that I always think of is Elizabeth Smart, that it's just like, no one would ever wish that for anyone.
Right.
But look at what she's doing now, and the example and the, her mission that she's fulfilling is so powerful. And so it's just, the things that we endure, you just don't know why, what the purpose is. But you can have a choice. You can either take it and go, well, my life is just junky and I am a victim and I have these reasons to be angry and upset or sad. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we also have the choice to do something else and to take what we've learned and make it a part of our mission, our personal mission, to be better, or to do something with it and to share it. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if we, that it takes that choice to do it. And so I appreciate your experience of this, talking about your siblings growing up, that the challenge that it presented, and also, that, most of us, we look at people who are in like show business and we go, oh my goodness, what a glamorous existence, and life must be so amazing. But at the same time, like, from your experience, you go, no, actually it's really hard. It's really challenging. And there's, it's not always, you don't always get the roles that you want, and you don't always, there are challenges that people experience. And again, it's like a perspective thing, that it's like, your trials are different from mine, but they're almost designed for us. It's like, I don't know if I can endure your trials, and I don't know if you can endure my trials, but we are given what we're given. And there's this man in our church, in our ward, who's quadriplegic, and he has been quadriplegic for over 30 years. That normally people who have an injury, they only live for like a decade, maybe. Sure. But he has endured this for over 30 years. He had a rugby accident when he was 21 and broke his neck. Wow. And he gave a talk in church a couple weeks ago, because he's like super, super intelligent and funny and cool, and like, he's this really nice guy. Mm-hmm. And he gave a talk, and in his talk, it was about trials. And he said, he's like, I don't particularly think my trial is any more difficult than anybody else's. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? He lives like he's in a hospital, I mean, he can't do anything. He has to have a trach, to breathe. And
wow.
But it's like when we're given the trials that we're given, and it's like you said earlier, that it's about your mindset and the perspective that you have, that you can allow your trials to defeat you, or you can use them as an opportunity to develop and to strengthen your character and your mindset. And how do we bring that into our family culture? How do you model your resilience that you've learned to your family now? Whenever your kids have challenges or they come up against a struggle, how do you then model to them this resilience?
For me, I want my children to feel abundance and not necessarily that scarcity. However, I let them have consequences. I feel it's really important also that I'm giving them opportunities to serve in the family and to work with the family, and that I'm asking them to be picking up this or that. And I mean, you see that in all families. I mean, it's like one book I need to have a copy in my home is Positive Pushing. And it talks about like that it's okay, that with love, we can still set these expectations and these amazing, things that our kids can do, rather than like, in fact, and so he actually talks about finding that deep motivation within. And I mean, we know that love is the best motivator.
Yeah.
And that's one thing consistent that I see with my mom, that she would set these expectations but then she would just accept us who we are, and accept the like mistakes and accept all that, but also like be like, hey, look, you can do this, and you can do these great things. There's a book called The Power by Rhonda Byrne.
Okay.
She's the author of The Secret.
Okay.
And what I love about The Power is it's all about the power of love.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a whole chapter about, if you're unemployed, then you act as though you have your dream job.
Yeah.
And you do and you get dressed every morning, and you do the things, and you put out there that faith that you have your dream job already. And how powerful that mindset of faith is. Like setting that intention like works miracles.
So if you were to define faith as that, it's an action word. When we talk about faith, that it's that seed, when you plant a seed in the ground, you don't just walk away and go, well, I planted that seed, it's going to grow. You have to do the work, right? That's going to get that seed to grow.
And when you're doing it joyfully, it's kind of rather easy when you're like looking forward towards what that's going to be grown. It's not a drudgery. It doesn't have to be a drudgery, just long-term perspective. Right?
Yeah, totally. That you can think, well, what is this plant going to grow up to become? I don't know, but as long as I'm doing the work and I have an idea that someday, it could be an apple tree, and I want to see the fruit of that tree.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's the way that, it's not an easy work to grow these ideals and visions that we have sometimes. But yeah, if you have that positive attitude and you keep working and you keep, what would I do today if I were there, if I had these goals?
And you'll find those tender mercies that come into your life as you're setting a positive intention, instead of the natural, I think, human tendency to like kind of hold back in fear or blame or whatever in those more negative frequencies, right? When you're setting a positive frequency, you find that like, whoa, I didn't know how I was going to water that tree, but look at the water spring up that came from the rock.
Right?
You know what I mean? Like, and so those things motivate you because along the line,
because you start to see the results. It's like, wow.
Right?
And that sometimes it can be easy to just be like, oh, I give up. This isn't good. This isn't working. But when we push through that, we know that it's our calling, then the resilience comes from, like we've said, that there's a little hints of a reward along the way that you see, okay, this is it. But just keep going, keep trying. And like,
there's a Yogi Ama song about that.
I'm sure there is.
Keep trying, keep trying, don't give up, never give up. Yeah.
That's awesome. But yeah, that when you talked about your siblings not getting their auditions or, the things that you endured, and it's just like, you just have to find what it is and keep working at it. And you're not going to progress unless you keep working at it. If you come against the trials and you just quit, then what have you done? It's like that quote by Thomas Edison that like, I didn't fail so many times with the light bulb. I found out so many times how a light bulb doesn't work, but the learning comes in the trying and in just doing. If you aren't taking steps forward, then the path will not get lighted for you. You have to keep taking the steps in order to see the light. I've learned a lot about this, like that you can have the trials, but that it's okay that, we all go through those different things that we endure, but that it's all about the choice that we have to choose to use those experiences to our benefit, or the choice to have a better attitude when we are enduring those things. And then also to model those things to our kids, and that's what shapes the culture in our homes, is how we endure. We want to, I think we want to like protect and guard our kids from having bad experiences, or, and we do have to we should do our best. But at the same time, when our kids experience hard things, that, if we can help them to have the attitude, or to say it's okay, and that as parents, we can't shelter them from everything. And so if we want to prepare them for a life of being resilient, then they're going to have to experience hard things. Mm-hmm. And, starting small with just complimenting them on their grit and their ability to do hard things.
And acting actually is, it's emotion work.
Mm-hmm.
And actually same kind of a thing in our family lives. There's few jobs as like a parent, we have emotion work where we are helping our children understand their emotions, and we are regulating our emotions. And there needs to be that love there in order to take care of those children's needs. It can't really be absent. It's not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it is interesting how those are related. It's related, that emotion work.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Acting.
It's part of
family life, family work.
Huh. So that's interesting. Every parent should take an acting class.
Right?
I want to thank Emma again for coming and being on the show and taking the time to tell us more about her life and her experiences and how they have taught her resilience and how she's able to translate that resilience to her own life. Our discussion reminded me a lot of this time when I heard somebody tell a story about going back and reading her old journals. And when you go back and you read your own old journals and you just cringe because you're like, oh my goodness, who is that person back then when I was writing this? But that if you go back and you read your journals and you cringe, that means that you've changed and you've grown. And so it's not a bad thing, because it's evidence that you've grown, that you've developed, that you've been able to experience new things that have taught you. And our little children might read those old journals and go, wow, I'm just like my mom, or things like that. And that creates an identity and a connection between our families, our children, but also that we can grow and that our trials help our families to develop. So I just wanted to leave that little tidbit with you. Thank you again for listening to the episode, and I really hope you enjoyed it and that you'll go and share and and subscribe and comment and rate and all those things. You can find my show notes at www.homeandfamilyculture.com. Thank you.